an anti-Chinese arc of freedom and prosperity through a charm campaign in Asia after taking office on the platform of nationalism and quantitative easing. Is China on a collision course against Japan despite the U.S.-Japan security treaty? War clouds are gathering as Secretary of State Clinton reaffirms the U.S. security commitments to Tokyo.
On the ultimate sovereignty of the islands, we acknowledge they are under the administration of Japan.
China blames the U.S. for the historical legacy in dispute.
We do not want to see any action taken by anyone.
Washington fails to cool nationalism in Northeast Asia as neighbors quarrel over territorial and historical disputes. Shinzo Abe promises closer security ties with Vietnam as ASEAN toes the line carefully, and an embattled right-wing LDP leader seeks to break isolation through intensive diplomacy. And Beijing shows defiance as top prices go to the military industry to deter strategic competitors. Will a balance of terror be forged to practice brinksmanship between formidable militaries in a volatile region? Welcome back. Today with me here in the Beijing studio is Mr. Victor Gao, and later we shall be talking to Dr. Douglas Powell, Vice President of Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and Professor Takasato Watanabe with Doshita University, Kyoto, in our phone crossovers. Welcome to Dialogue, sir.
Thank you for having me.
In your estimation, do you think the U.S. has actually taken side? If you look at Secretary Clinton's remarks about how the U.S. government rejects any provocative actions against the Japanese administrative control of the Diaoyu Islands?
Well, I hope the United States will not make a fundamental mistake in this territorial dispute between China and Japan involving Diaoyu Island, because if the United States makes any mistake in this very critical issue, then it will be a disaster. Mainly because, from the Chinese perspective, and also from the South Korean perspective, from the Russian perspective, all these territorial disputes with Japan are directly related to the Second World War. So I think Japan has demonstrated a dangerous tendency of trying to break away from the international security order which was created after the defeat of Japan and Germany in the Second World War. And this is dangerous. This will not be tolerated by anyone in this part of the world. So the United States should not pick the wrong side to stand for. And I think any confrontation eventually between China and the United States will really be a disaster for the whole world.
The Chinese government says that Washington should take the blame for the current flashpoint between Japan and China. Especially, the spokesperson of the foreign ministry, was referring to handing over the Diaoyu Islands to Japan, regardless of the opposition from Beijing.
Well, I think when I look at what Hillary Clinton said, first of all, Hillary is about to leave the State Department very soon. So she was, in the last few days of her service at the State Department. Secondly, because over the past 4 years, Hillary Clinton has the tendency of running the State Department with an eye on her own presidential ambition. So she tends to blow things out of proportion, and also she tends to politicize and sensationalize a lot of crucial international issues. So I think we need to give the United States more time. We need to wait until President Obama has sworn in for the second term. We need to give benefit of doubt to Senator Kerry, who will be the new Secretary of State, and also the new Secretary of Defense, for example. So I would say, I personally hope the United States will make the wise choice, because the flaring up or escalation of tension between China and the United States will not be good for China, will not be good for Japan, and also it will be disastrous for the United States.
And definitely detrimental to the joint efforts seeking for a new type of strategic relationship between the two major powers in the Pacific Ocean. Let me cross over to Mr. Douglas Powell, Vice President of Studies with the Carnegie Endowment. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Yang Ray.
Hi, Mr. Powell. You've been hanging around in Tokyo, and I believe you must be quite familiar with the rhetoric from the Japanese Foreign Ministry with regard to what Secretary Clinton says recently about the Diaoyu Islands. Now, do you think the security assurance that she gave her Japanese counterpart is part of the legacy she wants very much to leave behind, as she's an outgoing Secretary of State?
Well, I don't know anything about personal motivations, but I would be surprised if any Secretary of State would miss the opportunity to point out the strength of the U.S.-Japanese alliance, especially in the aftermath of a number of efforts by China to exercise its influence in the maritime region around Japan. To have failed to do so would have been a cause for criticism of her in her final days.
I have to leave you there. Victor, what do you think of Douglas' remarks about the American attention to its regional leadership and the credibility of the leadership?
No, I think this whole situation is very complicated, and it is natural that different countries or different leaders or different scholars may come up with their own very different views. However, one thing is very clear, that is, we do not need a confrontation with Japan. China does not need a war with Japan. However, if the situation remains unresolved, after the Japanese have made this crucial mistake of nationalizing the ownership of Diaoyu Island, something has to be done. And I think the Americans will not serve their own interests well if they basically just emphasize their alliance with Japan. Because do you really think the Americans want to shed their blood for defending Japan for this Diaoyu Island? I don't think so.
Excuse me, let me cross over to Mr. Powell. Well, time and again, I've heard off the record some American scholars complaining that they would never ever go to war with China over a few uninhabited rocky islands in the East China Sea. At the same time, Secretary Clinton warns that no provocative, particularly unilateral provocative actions whatsoever should be taken to challenge what she calls the de facto administrative control of Diaoyu Islands by the Japanese authorities. Mr. Powell, what do you make of her the mixed signals that she sent to Beijing?